After enough years watching people come and go, you start to notice something. The ones who show up with the least worn shoes. Empty pockets. Nothing but stubborn pride. They're often the ones who stay the longest. I saw it happen once on a dusty road in the Old West. The kind of afternoon that changes everything without warning. The heel of her left boot had worn clean through. Clara felt every pebble, every dried rut, the heat rising off the packed earth. She stopped at the gate. A man in a sweat-darkened shirt hammered fence posts alone. 2 children watched from the porch, a boy whittling. A girl arranging pebbles in a line. The boy saw her first. His knife stopped moving. Clara's hand found the gate latch, sun-warmed wood. A splinter pressed into her thumb. Behind her, the road stretched empty in both directions. The man straightened, studied her the way folks study weather they don't trust. "I'm looking for work," Clara said. "Anything. Cooking, cleaning, mending." He spat tobacco juice, wiped his mouth. "You best come inside," he said. "Got a proposition ain't fit for the yard. If you're wondering what kind of man makes such an offer to a stranger, you're not alone. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from today. And if you've been enjoying these stories without subscribing, I'd be much obliged if you'd hit that button and join our little community." The kitchen smelled of burnt coffee and something else. Dust on surfaces that used to be wiped daily. A woman's apron hanging on a hook by the stove, untouched. Clara sat at a table scarred by knife marks and water rings. The man poured coffee into a tin cup and slid it across to her. The liquid was black as pitch and twice as bitter. She drank it anyway. The warmth mattered more than the taste. The children hovered in the doorway. The boy stood in front of his sister, one arm stretched back to keep her behind him. "Name's Wyatt Hayes," the man said. He didn't sit. "Those are my brother's children. Samuel's 7. Lily's 5. Clara's cup stopped halfway to her mouth. "Your brothers." Wyatt reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a photograph. He laid it on the table between them. A young couple, formal posed. The same 2 children stood between their parents. Smaller, scrubbed clean. "Thomas and Margaret," Wyatt said. "Wagon accident on the Creek Road, 2 months back." Clara looked at the photograph. The woman had kind eyes. The man shared Wyatt's jaw, the same stubborn set to the mouth. "Their grandparents want the children," Wyatt continued. "The Cartwrights. Margaret's folks, they got money, connections to the territorial judge." He tapped the photograph once. "Ain't about the kids, though. It's about the 40 acres Thomas left them, and the settlement money from the freight company." Clara set down her cup. "And you need a wife?" It wasn't a question. "I asked every widow and spinster in 3 counties," Wyatt said. His voice stayed flat. "Ain't no woman willing to marry a man with 2 grieving kids and a lawsuit hanging over his head. I was out of choices before you knocked on that gate." He met her eyes. "Marry me before sunset. Stand beside me when that judge asks who's gonna raise these young'uns. After it's done, you can stay or go. I'll pay honest wages either way." The silence stretched. Clara could hear the boy breathing in the doorway. The girl's thumb had found its way into her mouth. "Why me?" Clara asked. "You don't know a thing about me. You knocked asking for work. Not charity, work." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "That tells me enough." Clara looked at the children again. The boy's knuckles had gone white on the doorframe. The girl's eyes were fixed on Clara's face. Waiting. The hearing was tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. She had less than 16 hours to decide if she was willing to marry a stranger. Clara needed air. She walked past the barn, past the chicken coop with its rusted wire, past the corral where 3 horses watched her with mild interest. The afternoon sun pressed down on her shoulders. Her dress clung to her back. Behind the barn, she found them, 2 mounds of earth, still raw, not yet settled into the ground. Wooden crosses marked each one. The names carved deep with a chisel: Thomas Hayes, Margaret Hayes. Below the names, dates. Thomas had been 28 years old, Margaret, 26. Younger than Clara's own parents when they died. She knelt in the dirt, didn't pray, just breathed. The soil smelled of turned earth and something green wild grass pushing up at the edges of the graves. Someone had placed a small bunch of wildflowers at the base of Margaret's cross. The petals had dried and curled, but they were still there. The children. Clara thought, one of them had picked those flowers. She stayed there until her knees ached. Then she stood, brushed the dirt from her skirt, and walked back toward the house. Wyatt stood on the porch. His hat was in his hands the first time she'd seen him without it. His hair was gray at the temples, more than she'd expected. He looked older without the hat, tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. "I've got one condition," Clara said. He waited. "We don't lie to those children about what this is." Wyatt's jaw worked. He looked past her, toward the barn, toward the graves she knew he couldn't see from here but could probably feel. "Fair enough," he said. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "Got the license from the county clerk this morning, before you showed up." He unfolded it, showed her the official seal. "Was planning to ride to the next county, see if any woman there might consider it." Clara looked at the paper. Her name wasn't on it yet, just Wyatt's, and a blank space where a bride's name should go. "Guess I saved you the trip," she said. Wyatt almost smiled. Almost. The wagon ride to town took 40 minutes. Clara sat in the back with the children. Samuel pressed himself against the far side, as much distance between them as the buckboard allowed. Lily sat in the middle, her bare feet dangling over the edge. "Are you going to be our new mama?" The question came out of nowhere. Lily's voice was matter-of-fact. Curious, Samuel's head snapped toward his sister, then toward Clara. "I'm going to be your Uncle Wyatt's wife," Clara said. She chose her words carefully. "That's all I know for certain." Lily considered this. Then she nodded and went back to watching the road pass beneath them. Samuel said nothing. His arms stayed crossed for the rest of the ride. The church was small. Clapboard walls, a single stained glass window showing a lamb, pews of raw pine that smelled of sawdust and lemon oil. Reverend Morrison met them at the door, blinking in confusion. "This is rather sudden, Wyatt." "Life's been sudden lately, Reverend." The Reverend's wife served as witness. She was a plump woman with kind eyes and flour still dusting her apron. She smiled at Clara, and the smile was warm but puzzled. The children sat in the front pew. Lily's feet swung back and forth, not quite reaching the floor. Samuel sat rigid, arms crossed, staring at the wall behind the Reverend's head. The ceremony took 4 minutes. Clara's voice held steady through, for richer or for poorer. It held through, in sickness and in health. But when she said, "Until death do us part," something caught in her throat. She had to swallow twice before the words came out. Wyatt said, "I do." He wasn't looking at her. His eyes were on the children. Clara understood then. She was not the point. She was the means, a solution to a problem, a warm body to stand beside him in a courtroom, Strangely, this made it easier. She knew exactly what she was, no pretense, no illusion. The Reverend pronounced them man and wife. Wyatt did not kiss her. He shook her hand instead, a brief, businesslike grip, and turned to gather the children. Clara signed the marriage register. The quill was old, the nib worn. She dipped it in the inkwell and wrote her name, Clara Dawson. Then she paused. Clara Hayes. She wrote it. The ink bled slightly on the last letter, spreading into the paper. She set down the quill and looked at what she'd done. Clara Hayes, a name that belonged to a dead woman's sister-in-law, a name that came with a ranch and 2 children and a husband she'd known for 3 hours. The ride home was quieter. The sun dropped toward the hills, painting the sky copper and rose. The shadows grew long across the road. Lily fell asleep against Clara's arm. The girl's weight was slight, her breathing soft and even. Clara held still, afraid to wake her. Samuel watched the road ahead. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed on some point in the distance. He hadn't looked at Clara once since they'd left the church. Wyatt drove in silence. His shoulders were tense beneath his shirt, his hands steady on the reins. The ranch came into view as the last of the sun slipped below the horizon. The house was dark, no lamp in the window, no smoke from the chimney. It looked abandoned, empty. Wyatt pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down. He lifted Lily from Clara's arms without a word and carried her toward the house. Samuel followed. Not looking back, Clara sat alone in the wagon. The evening air was cooling now, the heat of the day bleeding away into the darkening sky. Somewhere behind the barn, a cow lowed. She looked at her left hand. The ring was there, a plain gold band, worn thin with age, Wyatt's mother's ring. He'd told her, the only one he had. She was married, to a man she didn't know, in a place she'd never been, with 2 children who didn't want her there. Tomorrow morning, she would stand in a courtroom and pretend this was real. Clara climbed down from the wagon. Her boots hit the packed dirt of the yard. The house waited, dark and silent. She walked toward it. Inside, a lamp flickered to life. Wyatt's silhouette moved past the window. Then another shape appeared smaller, watching. Samuel, the boy, was still awake, still watching, and Clara realized, with a cold certainty that settled in her stomach, that convincing a judge would be the easy part. The children were the ones she had to prove herself to. Clara woke to unfamiliar walls. Gray light seeped through cotton curtains she didn't recognize. The ceiling was wrong, lower than any room she had slept in before. The boards darker, older. She lay still, listening. Through the floorboards came the sounds of someone moving. Water poured into a basin, the scrape of a straight razor against leather, a man clearing his throat. Her husband. Clara sat up. The spare room was small, barely large enough for the rope bed and a pine washstand, but there was a wardrobe in the corner oak, polished, too fine for the rest of the room. Margaret's wardrobe, Margaret's room. Once, Clara crossed the cold floor in her bare feet and opened the doors. Dresses hung in a neat row, calico for every day, a gray wool for church, and in the back, something darker, a dress of deep blue wool with jet buttons down the front. Clara held it against herself. The sleeves were slightly short. The waist was close, but not exact. She rolled the cuffs once and fastened the buttons. She had nothing else. The kitchen smelled of coffee and fried eggs. Wyatt stood at the stove, his face freshly shaved, his hair wet and combed back. He glanced at Clara when she entered, then looked away. Samuel sat at the table, pushing eggs around his plate. Lily was already eating, her small hands wrapped around a tin cup of milk. The boy's eyes found Clara, traveled down to the dress. His fork stopped moving. "You wearing Mama's dress?" It wasn't a question. Clara's hands went to the fabric at her sides. "I am," she said. "I hope that's all right." Samuel didn't answer. He looked back at his plate, started pushing the eggs again. Lily reached out and touched the sleeve. Her fingers brushed the wool, light as a moth. "Mama liked that one," she said. "She wore it to church." Clara didn't know what to say. She stood there, in a dead woman's dress, while a 5-year-old girl touched the fabric her mother had worn. Wyatt set a plate on the table. Eggs, bread. He nodded toward it. "Eat," he said. "We leave in 20 minutes." The courthouse was a 2-story building of brick and whitewash, sitting at the center of town like a fist. A pot-bellied stove crouched in the corner, cold now, unneeded in the morning warmth. The pews were full. Word traveled fast in small towns, and a sudden marriage, followed by a custody hearing, was the kind of story that brought people out. Clara sat in the front row with the children. Lily pressed against her side. Samuel sat 2 feet away, arms crossed, staring straight ahead. The Cartwrights sat across the aisle. Mrs. Cartwright was a woman in her 50s, gray-haired, dressed in black silk that rustled when she moved. Her face was composed, her eyes dry despite the handkerchief she pressed to her lips. Mr. Cartwright was taller, thinner, with the look of a man who counted every dollar twice. Their lawyer was a young man with oiled hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Judge Harlan entered, silver-haired, heavy-set, with spectacles perched on a nose that had been broken at least once. He settled into his chair and surveyed the courtroom. "This is a hearing regarding the custody of Samuel Thomas Hayes and Lily Margaret Hayes," he said. "Petitioners are Franklin and Constance Cartwright. Respondent is Wyatt Hayes." He looked at Wyatt. "I see you've brought counsel." Old Doc Greer rose from his seat beside Wyatt. He was 70 if he was a day, with a white beard and hands that shook slightly. "I've agreed to represent Mr. Hayes in this matter. Your Honor, Doc, you're a physician." "I read law before I read medicine. Judge, passed the bar in 62. Judge Harlan rubbed his forehead. "I'm only allowing this because you're the only man in 50 miles who's read a law book. Proceed." The Cartwright's lawyer stood. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Your Honor, my clients seek only what is best for their grandchildren. Mrs. Cartwright lost her daughter 2 months ago, her only child. The children are all she has left of Margaret." He paused. Letting that settle, Mr. Hayes is a bachelor rancher who works from dawn to dusk. He has no wife, no female influence in the home, no experience raising children. My clients can offer stability, education, a proper home in a proper town, a woman's gentle hand. Mrs. Cartwright dabbed her eyes with the handkerchief. No tears fell. "My daughter would have wanted her children raised properly," she said. Her voice wavered. "Just enough. With family." Mr. Cartwright nodded. "We can provide what a bachelor rancher cannot." Dr. Greer rose slowly. "Your Honor, Mr. Hayes is no longer a bachelor." He handed a document to the judge. Clara saw the territorial seal, the fresh ink of yesterday's date. Judge Harlan's eyebrows rose. "A marriage certificate. Dated." He checked the paper. "Yesterday." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Clara felt every eye in the room turn toward her. "Mrs. Hayes," the judge said, "please approach." Clara stood. Her legs were steady beneath Margaret's blue dress, but her hands were not. She clasped them in front of her as she walked to the front of the room. The Cartwrights' lawyer circled her like a cat with a mouse. "Mrs. Hayes, you arrived in this territory how long ago?" 3 days. More murmurs. The lawyer smiled. 3 days, and you've been married? How long exactly? 16 hours. The courtroom buzzed. Clara kept her eyes on the judge. "I understand how that sounds. Your Honor, I'm asking for the chance to prove it means something." The lawyer pressed on. "Do you know the children's bedtime routine?" "Not yet." "Their favorite foods?" "No." "Their middle names, their birthdays, the songs their mothers sang to them?" Clara's throat tightened. "No, but I intend to learn, starting today." The lawyer turned to the judge, spreading his hands. "Your Honor, this is a sham. A marriage of convenience designed to circumvent. That's enough," Judge Harlan said. He removed his spectacles and rubbed his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was tired. "I've known Wyatt Hayes for 15 years. He's not the kind of man who marries on a whim." He looked at Clara. "And I've seen enough desperate women in my courtroom to recognize one when she walks in. The question is whether desperation and good intentions are enough to raise 2 children." He put his spectacles back on. "The circuit court reconvenes in 2 weeks. I'm postponing my decision until then. I want to see this domestic arrangement in practice." He looked at both parties. "Mrs. Hayes, you will care for these children as if they were your own. Mr. and Mrs. Cartwright, you are welcome to visit with reasonable notice. We'll reconvene, and I'll make my decision then." The gavel fell. The sound echoed off the brick walls. Clara turned to look at Wyatt. His face was unreadable. Doc Greer patted his shoulder. Across the aisle, the Cartwrights' lawyer was smiling. A small smile, satisfied. They had wanted time, too. Clara realized. Time to watch her fail. Time to gather evidence. Time to prove that a stranger in a dead woman's dress could never be a mother. Mrs. Cartwright rose from her seat. Her eyes found Clara's across the crowded room. The look lasted only a moment, not disappointment. Recalculation, the look of a woman who had lost a battle but not the war. This wasn't over. This was barely begun. The children waited by the door. Samuel's arms were still crossed. Lily reached for Clara's hand. Clara took it. The girl's fingers were small, warm, trusting, behind her. She heard Mrs. Cartwright's voice, low and cold. "Enjoy it while you can, dear. 2 weeks isn't very long." The biscuits burned on the 3rd day. Clara pulled them from the cast-iron stove with a rag wrapped around her hand. The acrid smell of scorched flour filling the kitchen. The bottoms were black, the tops were pale. Somehow she'd managed both at once. Samuel sat at the table, watching. The corner of his mouth twitched. Wyatt came in from the yard, smelling of hay and horde sweat. He looked at the biscuits, picked one up, broke it in half. "Better than yesterday," he said, and ate it anyway. Clara scraped the rest into the slop bucket for the pigs. On the 4th day, she ruined the wash. Too much lye in the water, the clothes came out stiff as boards, and one of Lily's pinafores had a hole eaten through the fabric where the soap had pooled. She stood at the washboard behind the house, her hands red and raw, staring at the ruined dress. The lye stung the cracks in her skin. Lily appeared at her elbow. The girl studied the hole, then looked up at Clara. "Mama used to sing when she washed," she said. "Maybe that helps." Clara didn't know what to say. She wrung out the dress and hung it on the line anyway. The whole flapped in the breeze, like a small, accusing flag. On the 5th day, the beans turned to paste. She'd left them on the stove too long while she swept the front room. The cast-iron pot had burned dry. The beans stuck to the bottom in a thick brown layer that took an hour to scrub loose. Wyatt ate cornbread for dinner. So did the children. Nobody mentioned the beans. Clara found Margaret's recipe book on the 6th morning. It was tucked in a drawer beneath a stack of dishcloths, a small leather journal with handwritten pages. The ink faded in places. Grease stains marking the most used recipes. Biscuits, page 12. Clara read the instructions 3 times. Measured the flour carefully. Cut the lard into the mixture with a fork. Just like the book said. When Wyatt came in for breakfast, he took a biscuit from the plate, chewed, swallowed. "Edible," he said. It was the closest thing to a compliment she'd received since arriving. Clara learned the rhythm of the ranch in pieces. Wyatt left at first light, before the children woke. He returned at dusk, ate whatever Clara had managed to cook, and spent his evenings on the porch, staring at nothing. He spoke more to the horses than to her. She didn't take it personally. The man was drowning. She could see it in the way his shoulders curved forward, the way his eyes went distant when the children laughed, the way he sometimes stopped in the middle of a task and just stood there, hands at his sides, like he'd forgotten what he was doing. He was grieving. They all were. Lily opened first. It happened on the 4th afternoon. Clara was sitting in the front room, trying to repair the hole in the pinafore. When the girl appeared in the doorway, she held a hairbrush in one hand and 2 faded ribbons in the other, one red, one blue. The red one was frayed at the edges. "Can you braid like Mama did?" Clara set down the needle. "I don't know how, but I can try." Lily crossed the room and climbed onto Clara's lap. Her weight was slight, her hair smelling of sunshine and dust. "I'll show you," she said. The lesson took half an hour. Clara's fingers fumbled with the strands, making the braid too loose, then too tight, then lopsided. Lily was patient. She guided Clara's hands, showed her where to cross, where to hold. When they finished, the braid was crooked and the ribbon was tied in a knot that would take scissors to undo. But Lily looked at herself in Margaret's small hand mirror and smiled. "It's pretty," she said. "You did good." Clara's throat tightened. She busied herself with putting away the brush. Later that afternoon, Lily led Clara to her parents' bedroom. The door had been closed since Clara arrived. She'd assumed it was off limits. But Lily pushed it open and walked inside like she belonged there. The room smelled of dust and lavender. Margaret's lavender, probably. Dried in a sachet somewhere. Lily showed Clara everything. Her mother's jewelry box, with its broken clasp and tarnished silver mirror. Her mother's rocking chair, positioned by the window where the light was best for sewing. The quilt her mother had been making a pattern of interlocking stars, half finished. The needle still threaded and waiting. "She was going to put it on my bed," Lily said. When it was done, Clara didn't touch the quilt. It felt like trespassing. Samuel was harder. He tested her constantly. On the 3rd morning, he spilled his milk at breakfast, a deliberate sweep of his arm that sent the tin cup clattering across the table and the milk pooling on the floor. He watched Clara's face, waiting. Clara got the rag, wiped up the milk, poured him another cup. "Finish your breakfast," she said. Samuel's eyes narrowed, but he drank the milk. On the 4th day, He ignored every instruction she gave. Clara asked him to bring in firewood. He walked outside and sat on the porch steps instead, whittling a stick into nothing. Clara asked him to wash his hands before supper. He came to the table with dirt under his fingernails and mud on his cuffs. She didn't argue. She served his food. He ate it. Every morning. He asked the same question. "When are you leaving?" Every morning. Clara gave the same answer. "Not today." On the fifth afternoon, he asked something different. "How come you don't got any family?" Clara was kneading bread dough. Her hands still dealed. "I did," she said. "They're gone. Like yours." Samuel didn't respond, but he stopped asking when she was leaving. On the fifth day, Clara found his hiding place. She'd gone to the barn to look for more lye. The root cellar was empty and heard movement in the hayloft, soft, like someone trying not to be noticed. She didn't climb the ladder. Instead, she went to the root cellar, found an apple that hadn't gone soft, and left it on the bottom rung. When she checked an hour later, the apple was gone. Town gossip reached her on the sixth day. Mrs. Holloway came to visit the pastor's wife, the kind-eyed woman from the wedding, and stayed for coffee that Clara managed not to burn. "I thought you should know what folks are saying," Mrs. Holloway said. Her voice was gentle, but her words were not. Gold digger, fortune hunter, marriage of convenience. Clara wrapped her hands around her cup. The coffee was still too hot, but she held it anyway. "I suppose it is convenient," she said, "for the children." Mrs. Holloway studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. "That's what I told them. Not that they listened." She reached across the table and patted Clara's hand. "Come to church on Sunday. Sit with me. Give their tongues something else to wag about." After Mrs. Holloway left, Clara walked to the general store to buy flour. She was counting out coins at the counter when she heard Wyatt's voice from the back of the store. "I don't give a damn what Hank Morrison thinks," he was saying. "She's my wife. Anybody got a problem with that can take it up with me." Clara set the coins on the counter. The storekeeper, a thin man with a permanent squint, looked at her, then looked away. She bought the flour and walked home without speaking to Wyatt. That evening, she sat on the porch with Margaret's mending basket. The light was fading, but she could still see well enough to work. Bone needles, thread the color of dust, a pile of shirts and dresses that needed patching. The screen door creaked. Samuel stood in the doorway. He held a torn shirt in his hands, his Sunday shirt, ripped along the seam where the sleeve met the shoulder. He didn't speak, just stood there, the shirt hanging from his fingers, his face unreadable. Clara patted the step beside her. Samuel hesitated. 1 second. 2. Then he crossed the porch and sat down. Clara threaded the needle, started the repair. The fabric was thin, worn soft with use. She worked carefully, making the stitches small and even. Neither of them said a word. But when she finished, Samuel took the shirt and walked inside without looking at her. He'd chosen to sit beside her. He'd brought her something to fix. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was something. Clara stayed on the porch until the stars came out. The evening air was cool, the smell of hay and wood smoke drifting from somewhere nearby. Tomorrow would be the 7th day. 1 week down, 1 week left, and the Cartwrights hadn't visited yet. Clara knew they would. The judge had given them permission. It was only a matter of when. She looked toward the road, half expecting to see a carriage approaching in the darkness. But there was nothing. Just the empty lane, the silent fields, the distant lowing of cattle settling for the night. They were coming. She could feel it. The only question was what they would find when they arrived. The Cartwrights came on the 8th day. Clara was elbow-deep in bread dough when she heard the carriage wheels on the lane. She looked up. Flour dusting her forearms, her hair escaping its pins, a smear of grease from the morning's bacon on her cheek. The carriage was black, polished, pulled by 2 matching bays. It stopped in front of the house with the precision of a military maneuver. Clara wiped her hands on her apron. The flour left white streaks on the faded fabric. She pushed her hair back, felt the grease on her fingers, and knew she'd only made it worse. The Cartwrights stepped down from the carriage like they were visiting a museum. Mrs. Cartwright's black silk rustled as she surveyed the yard, the weeds in the garden, the peeling whitewash, the broken step on the porch that Wyatt hadn't had time to fix. "How quaint," she said. Mr. Cartwright said nothing. His eyes moved from the house to the barn, to the fields beyond, calculating, appraising. Clara met them at the door. "Mr. and Mrs. Cartwright, the judge said you might visit." "With reasonable notice," Mrs. Cartwright replied. "I trust this is reasonable enough." It wasn't. They both knew it. But Clara stepped aside and let them in. The kitchen still smelled of bacon grease. The bread dough sat on the table, half kneaded, covered with a cloth. The breakfast dishes were stacked by the wash basin, not yet scrubbed. A fly buzzed against the window glass. Mrs. Cartwright's gaze moved across every surface, the dust on the mantel, the cobweb in the corner of the ceiling, the scorch mark on the floor where Clara had dropped a coal from the stove 2 days ago. "You're learning to cook from scratch," she said. "How admirable." Clara's hands tightened on her apron. "I'm learning. Margaret had such a gift for it." Mrs. Cartwright picked up a tin cup from the table, examined it, set it down. She could make a feast from nothing, even as a girl. She knew her way around a kitchen. Then something shifted in the older woman's face. Her hand lingered on the cup, Margaret's cup. Clara realized. The one with the small chip on the rim. She used to drink her coffee from this, Mrs. Cartwright said. Her voice was different now, softer. Every morning, said the chip made it hers. For a moment, the mask slipped. Clara saw grief there, real grief, the kind that doesn't fade with time, only hardens into something else. Then Mrs. Cartwright set the cup down and the mask returned. "Where are my grandchildren?" Lily appeared in the doorway. She saw her grandmother and froze. "Come here, darling," Mrs. Cartwright said. Her voice changed again, honeyed now. Practiced, she opened her arms. "Come give your grandmother a hug." Lily didn't move. Her eyes went to Clara, then back to Mrs. Cartwright. "Go on," Clara said quietly. "It's all right." Lily crossed the room slowly. She submitted to the embrace, her small body stiff, her arms hanging at her sides. Mrs. Cartwright held her for a long moment, stroking her hair. "My precious girl," she murmured. "You look just like your mother." Samuel appeared behind his sister. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. "Samuel," Mr. Cartwright said, "come shake your grandfather's hand." Samuel didn't move. "Samuel!" The boy's jaw tightened. He crossed the room, stuck out his hand, and shook once, hard. Then he stepped back to stand beside Lily. Mr. Cartwright's face showed nothing, but his eyes went cold. Wyatt came in from the fields an hour later. He found Mr. Cartwright in the barn. examining the tack, running a hand along the leather of a saddle. Clara watched from the kitchen window. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see the set of Wyatt's shoulders, the way his hands curled into fists at his sides. Mr. Cartwright gestured toward the house, toward the fields, toward the road that led to town. His voice was low, reasonable, the voice of a man discussing business. Wyatt's voice carried through the open window in fragments. "Don't give a damn about your water rights. A territorial board can look all they want. My brother's children, not yours." Mr. Cartwright said something else, something that made Wyatt go still. When Clara looked again, both men were walking back toward the house. Wyatt's face was tight. Mr. Cartwright was smiling. The Cartwrights left an hour later. Mrs. Cartwright embraced Lily again. The girl still didn't hug back and patted Samuel's head. The boy flinched. "We'll see you soon, darlings," she said. "Very soon." The carriage rolled away down the lane. Clara stood on the porch, watching until it disappeared. Wyatt walked past her without a word. He went to the fence post he'd been repairing, picked up his hammer, and drove a nail so hard the wood split. He stood there, staring at the ruined post. Then he threw the hammer into the dirt and walked back to the barn. Clara didn't follow him. That evening, she burned the rice. She'd been watching it. She was sure she'd been watching it, but the pea had boiled dry while she was setting the table. The smell hit her first, acrid and unmistakable. Samuel looked at his plate, looked at Clara. "You trying to poison us?" His voice was flat, matter-of-fact. Not cruel, just honest. Clara didn't answer. She scraped the rice into the slop bucket and served cornbread instead. The next morning, Clara took the children to the general store to buy thread. The mending pile had grown again, and she needed to get out of the house. The walls were closing in. The store was busy. Women clustered near the fabric display, their voices low, their eyes sharp. When Clara walked in, the conversation stopped. She felt their gazes, measuring, judging. Clara walked to the thread display, selected a spool of brown, a spool of white. Her hands were steady, but her pulse was not. Whispers started behind her. "Married him for the ranch. Poor Margaret, barely cold in the ground. Those children deserve better." Lily pressed against Clara's leg. Samuel stood apart, his face blank, his shoulders rigid. Clara paid for the thread and left without looking back. That evening, she walked out to the barn. The light was fading, purple and gray bleeding into the sky. She found an upturned bucket near the horse stalls and sat down. Her shoulders started shaking before she realized she was crying. Quiet sobs. Muffled against her sleeve, she pressed her face into the crook of her arm and let it come. Footsteps on the packed dirt. She didn't look up. Wyatt didn't speak. He found another bucket, turned it over, and sat down, 3 feet away, not touching. He waited. Clara wiped her face with her sleeve, drew a shuddering breath. "I burned the rice again," she said. Her voice came out rough, scraped raw. "Samuel asked if I was trying to poison them, and that Cartwright woman looked at me like I was dirt she'd tracked in." Wyatt said nothing. "I don't know what I'm doing," Clara continued. The words spilled out now. "I don't know how to be a mother. I don't know how to be a wife. I don't know how to cook or clean, or any of the things Margaret knew how to do." She stared at the barn wall, at the shadows gathering in the corners. "I don't know how to be this, Wyatt, any of it." Silence stretched between them, A horse shifted in its stall, leather creaking. When Wyatt spoke, his voice was quiet, tired. "Neither do I." Clara looked at him. "Been 2 months," he said. "Still reach for the coffee pot Thomas always filled. Still turn around to tell him something, then remember he's not there." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Every morning I wake up and forget for a second. Then I remember." Clara didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. "Reckon that's something," Wyatt said. "You and me, both trying to be something we don't know how to be." He stood, brushed the hay from his trousers. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's another day." He walked back toward the house. Clara watched him go, the slump of his shoulders, the weight in his steps. She stayed in the barn until the stars came out. Then she walked back to the house, washed her face in the basin, and went to bed. In the morning, she would try again, burn more biscuits, ruin more wash, fail in 100 small ways that Mrs. Cartwright would catalog and report. But she would try. That night, Clara dreamed of Margaret, a woman she'd never met, standing in this kitchen, wearing this apron, cooking at this stove, in the dream. Margaret turned and looked at her. Her eyes were kind, like Lily's. Her mouth curved into a small, sad smile. She said something, but Clara couldn't hear the words. Clara woke to a sound she didn't recognize. A cough, wet, rattling. She was out of bed before she was fully awake, her bare feet hitting the cold floor, her heart slamming against her ribs. She ran down the hall toward the children's room. Samuel was sitting up in bed, coughing into his hands. His face was flushed, his eyes were glassy. Lily stood beside him, her small hand on his shoulder. "He's hot," Lily said, "like Mama was, before she got better." But Margaret hadn't gotten better. Margaret had died, and Samuel was burning with fever. Clara sent Wyatt for the doctor before the sun was fully up. She found Margaret's medicine chest in the corner of the bedroom willow bark. Mustard powder, clean flannel. She made tea from the bark, straining it through cheesecloth the way her mother had taught her years ago. She spread mustard paste on flannel and laid it across Samuel's narrow chest. The smell filled the room, sharp, pungent, desperate. Samuel's fever climbed through the first day. His skin burned beneath Clara's palm. He threw off the quilts she tucked around him, then shivered so hard his teeth chattered. She covered him again. He threw them off again. Doc Greer came in the afternoon. He listened to Samuel's breathing, checked his pulse, peeled back his eyelids to look at his pupils. "Fever's got to break on its own," he said. "Keep doing what you're doing. Cool cloths, fluids, rest." He packed up his bag. "He's a strong boy. He'll pull through." Clara wanted to grab the old man by his lapels, wanted to shake him, but she just nodded, watched him leave, went back to Samuel's bedside. Lily slept in Clara's room that night, too frightened to stay in the room she shared with her brother. Clara managed both the sick child and the scared one. She tucked Lily in, sang a lullaby she half remembered, then returned to Samuel's side. The second night was worse. Samuel's fever spiked after midnight. His body arched off the mattress, his hands clawing at the sheets, sweat soaked through his nightshirt, through the bedding, pooling beneath him. "Mama," he gasped. "Mama, don't go. Please don't go." Clara caught his flailing hands, held them tight. "I'm here," she said. "I've got you. I'm not going anywhere. Mama, shh, I'm here. Rest now." She didn't that she wasn't his mother. She didn't correct him. She just held on. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, Wyatt appeared in the doorway. He held 2 tin cups of coffee. Clara took one without looking up. Their fingers brushed. Neither mentioned it. "You need to sleep," Wyatt said. Clara shook her head. Her hands were trembling now. Fine tremors she couldn't control. When she reached for the cloth in the water basin, she knocked the basin off the nightstand. Water splashed across the floor, soaking into the wood. She stared at the puddle, didn't move to clean it up. "Clara." "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. Her vision blurred at the edges. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. Yesterday morning, the morning before Wyatt crossed the room, took the cloth from her hand. "I'll watch him," he said. 2 hours. You sleep." Clara opened her mouth to argue, but her legs buckled beneath her, and she had to grab the bedpost to stay upright. 2 hours, Wyatt repeated. "Then you can take over?" She slept on the floor of the hallway, too exhausted to make it to her room. When she woke, gray light was seeping through the windows and every muscle in her body ached. The third day, she went to the well for fresh water. The bucket was heavy. She lifted it onto the stone rim, reached for the rope, and her foot slipped on the mud. She went down hard. The bucket tipped. Cold water soaked through her dress, her petticoat, her stockings. Mud squelched beneath her hands, her knees, her skirt. She tried to push herself up and slipped again, landing face first in the muck. For a moment, she just lay there, face down in the mud, soaking wet, exhausted beyond measure, a woman who couldn't even draw water from a well without falling. She pressed her forehead to the ground and sobbed. Great, ugly, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Mud smeared across her cheeks. Mixing with the tears, she could taste it, grit and dirt and something rotten. Margaret would have known what to do. Margaret would have nursed Samuel through this fever without spilling water, without burning biscuits, without falling face first into the mud like a fool. But Margaret was dead, and Clara was here, covered in filth, crying like a child, while a 7-year-old boy burned with fever 20 yards away. She pushed herself up. Mud dripped from her chin, her nose, her hair. She wiped her face with a muddy hand and only made it worse. She drew the water, carried the bucket inside, changed into her other dress, the only clean one left, the one she'd arrived in, worn through at the elbows. Margaret's dresses were all soiled from 3 days of nursing. She went back to Samuel's bedside. Wyatt was there. He looked at her, at the mud still in her hair, at her raw red eyes, at her shaking hands, and said nothing. Clara sat down, picked up the cloth, started again. The third night. Samuel's fever climbed higher. His skin was dry now, burning hot to the touch. He stopped sweating. His lips cracked and bled. Clara spooned willow bark tea between them, but most of it dribbled down his chin. "Mama," he whispered. "Mama, I'm cold." Clara climbed onto the bed beside him. She pulled him against her chest and held him there. Her arms wrapped around his burning body, her chin resting on top of his head. "I'm here," she said. "I've got you." She didn't know how long she held him. Hours, maybe. Her arms went numb, her back screamed, but she didn't let go. Sometime before dawn, she felt it. A shift, a change in his breathing. His skin was damp. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The fever was breaking. Clara's eyes closed. She tried to stay awake, but the exhaustion was too heavy. She slid into sleep with Samuel still in her arms. When she woke, morning light filled the room. Samuel was awake. Looking at her, Clara blinked. Her eyes were gritty, raw. Her whole body ached. She was still holding him. her arms stiff from hours in the same position. "You stayed." His voice came out as a croak. Raw, damaged by days of fever. Clara's throat tightened. She eased her arms loose, tried to sit up. Every muscle protested. "I stayed." Silence. The birds were singing somewhere outside. A rooster crowed. Samuel's eyes searched her face, taking in the mud she'd missed in her hair, the dark circles under her eyes, the cracked skin on her hands from days of wringing cloths. "My full name is Samuel Thomas Hayes," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "I'm 7 years old. I like blue best." He paused, drew a shaky breath. His eyes kept drifting closed, then opening again. "My mama made the best apple pie, and I don't want to live with those people." More words than he'd given her in 12 days combined. Clara didn't cry. She'd used up all her tears in the mud by the well, but something shifted in her chest, something that had been locked tight since she'd arrived. "I don't want you to live with them either," she said. Samuel's fingers found hers, weak, trembling, but there. "You're not my mama," he said. "I know. But you stayed. I stayed." His eyes closed. His breathing deepened. Within moments, he was asleep, real sleep this time, healing sleep. Clara sat with him until the sun was fully up. Then she eased her hand free, stood on legs that trembled, and walked to the door. Wyatt was in the hallway. He'd been there all night, she realized, keeping watch from a distance. "Fever's broken," Clara said. Wyatt nodded. His eyes moved over her face, the exhaustion there. The mud still caked behind her ear. The raw determination that had carried her through. "Final hearings in 2 days," he said. "Friday morning. Circuit Court." Clara had forgotten. In the chaos of the fever, she'd lost track of the calendar. 2 days, 48 hours, and then she would stand before Judge Harlan and try to prove that she deserved to keep a family she'd only just begun to earn. The morning of the final hearing, Clara braided Lily's hair. Her fingers moved without fumbling now. Over, under, over. She'd practiced every day since Lily first taught her. The braid came out straight, tight, even. She tied the red ribbon at the end, the frayed one. Lily's favorite. "Pretty," Lily said, looking in Margaret's hand mirror. "Pretty," Clara agreed. Samuel stood in the doorway of his room. He was pale, thinner than he'd been 2 weeks ago. The fever had taken something out of him, but he was dressed his Sunday shirt, the one Clara had mended, buttoned to the collar. "Morning," he said. Clara looked at him. It was the first word he'd offered her, voluntarily since the fever broke. "Morning," she said back. Samuel crossed the hall and stood in front of her. His collar was crooked, the fabric bunched on one side. He didn't say anything, just waited. Clara reached out and straightened the collar, smoothed the fabric. Her fingers lingered for a moment on his shoulder. Samuel nodded once, then he walked downstairs. Wyatt was waiting on the porch when Clara came out. The wagon was already hitched, the horses stamping in the morning cool. He looked at her, really looked for the first time in days. "Whatever happens in there," he said, "you've done right by them. That ain't nothing." Clara didn't know what to say, so she just climbed into the wagon and helped the children up beside her. The ride to town took 40 minutes. Nobody spoke. Lily held Clara's hand the whole way. Samuel sat with his arms crossed, but he didn't move to the far side of the wagon this time. He stayed close, The courthouse was fuller than before. Word had spread about Samuel's fever, about Clara nursing him through 3 days and nights, about the Cartwrights' visit. Small towns had long memories and longer tongues. Clara walked in with her head up. She was wearing her own dress, the one she'd arrived in, patched at the elbows, washed and pressed as best she could. She didn't have Margaret's blue wool anymore. It was still stained with mud and sweat from the days by Samuel's bedside. This was who she was, a woman with worn boots and 17 cents and nothing to offer but the fact that she'd stayed. Judge Harlan entered. The courtroom rose, then settled. "We're here to conclude the matter of custody for Samuel Thomas Hayes and Lily Margaret Hayes," the judge said. "I trust both parties have had adequate time to demonstrate their positions." The Cartwrights' lawyer stood. His smile was sharper today, his voice more confident. "Your Honor, in the past 2 weeks, my clients have visited the Hayes Ranch on 2 occasions. What they observed was troubling." He consulted his notes. A woman who cannot cook a simple meal without burning it. A woman who ruined an entire wash with too much lye. A woman who, by her own admission, did not know the children's names, their routines, their histories when she married Mr. Hayes. He turned to look at Clara. Mrs. Hayes arrived in this territory as a mail-order bride. She was swindled out of her money within days of arrival. She was penniless, homeless, and desperate when she knocked on Mr. Hayes's door. He paused. "This is not a woman who chose these children. This is a woman who had no other choice." Clara's hands tightened in her lap. She kept her eyes on the judge. "Furthermore," the lawyer continued, "we have concerns about the boy's recent illness. Samuel Hayes suffered a serious fever that lasted nearly 4 days. 4 more days. Your Honor, in a household where the only female presence is a woman who cannot manage basic domestic tasks." Mrs. Cartwright dabbed her eyes. This time, Clara saw tears, real tears. Whether for Margaret or for the children or for the performance, she couldn't tell. "My clients can offer these children stability," the lawyer said. "Education, a proper home with a woman who knows how to care for them, not a stranger who burns biscuits and falls in the mud." Clara's face went hot. Someone had seen her. Someone had watched her lying face down in the muck, sobbing like a child, and reported it to the Cartwrights. The lawyer sat down. Judge Harlan turned to Doc Greer. "Does the respondent wish to present any witnesses?" Doc Greer rose slowly. "We do. Your Honor." Mrs. Holloway came forward first. She walked to the front of the courtroom with her head high, her Sunday dress pressed and clean. "I've known Wyatt Hayes for 20 years, she said. "He's a good man, quiet, stubborn, but good." She looked at Clara. "And that woman there, she's been to church every Sunday since she arrived. She sits in the front pew with those children. She holds Lily's hand during the hymns. She makes sure Samuel has a clean handkerchief." The lawyer started to rise. "Your Honor, this is hardly— I'm not finished," Mrs. Holloway said. Her voice was firm. "I visited that ranch 3 days ago. Samuel was still recovering from his fever. And do you know what I saw?" She pointed at Clara. "I saw a woman who hadn't slept in 4 days, who had mud in her hair and cracks in her hands from wringing cloths, who was still sitting by that boy's bedside, making sure he took his medicine." She turned to the judge. "I don't know if she can cook. I don't know if she can keep house, but I know she can love those children, and that's what matters." Doc Greer called the storekeeper next the thin man, with the permanent squint, who had watched Clara buy flour and thread for 2 weeks. "She pays her bills," he said. "Doesn't complain about prices. Brings those kids with her every time. The girl holds her hand. The boy. He paused. The boy didn't used to look at her. Now he does. Finally. Doc Greer himself testified. I treated Samuel Hayes for his fever, he said. When I arrived, Mrs. Hayes had already prepared mustard plasters, willow bark tea, and cool cloths. She knew what she was doing. He looked at the Cartwrights' lawyer. That boy is alive because she didn't leave his side for 3 days. I've seen mothers do less. Judge Harlan turned to Clara. Mrs. Hayes, do you wish to address the court? Clara stood. Her legs were steady. Her hands were not. Your Honor, I'm not going to pretend I know what I'm doing. Her voice came out rough. She cleared her throat. I burned biscuits for a week before I figured out the stove. I ruined the wash twice. I fell face first in the mud, trying to draw water from the well. A murmur went through the courtroom. Clara kept going. But I know things about those children that I didn't know 2 weeks ago. I know that Samuel won't eat eggs unless they're scrambled, not fried. I know he sleeps with his father's pocket knife under his pillow closed. I checked. I know that Lily sings to herself when she's scared. The same song. Something about a mockingbird. I don't know all the words yet, but I'm learning. She looked at the Cartwrights. I know that their grandmother held Lily and stroked her hair and called her precious. But Lily didn't hug back. I know that their grandfather shook Samuel's hand like he was closing a business deal. Clara's voice steadied. And I know that neither of them asked about the fever. Not once. Mrs. Cartwright's face went pale. Mr. Cartwright's jaw tightened. I didn't choose these children, Clara said. That's true. I knocked on that door because I was desperate and hungry and had nowhere else to go. But I stayed because they needed someone to stay. She looked at the judge. I stayed through burnt biscuits and ruined wash and 3 days of fever. I stayed when it would have been easier to leave. She took a breath. I can't promise I'll be a good mother. I don't know how to be one, but I can promise I'll be there. Every morning, every night, every time they need someone. She sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Harlan removed his spectacles, rubbed his eyes, put them back on. I've presided over a lot of custody cases, he said. Most of them come down to money. Property. Who has more? Who can provide more? He looked at the Cartwrights. You have money. You have a fine house. You have connections. He looked at Clara. She has nothing. Worn boots, a patched dress, 2 weeks of experience. He was quiet for a long moment. But she stayed. He picked up his gavel. Custody of Samuel Thomas Hayes and Lily Margaret Hayes is awarded to Wyatt Hayes and his wife, Clara Hayes. Case dismissed. The gavel fell. The sound echoed through the courtroom. Clara sat frozen, not quite believing it. Lily threw her arms around Clara's neck. Samuel didn't move, but his hand found Clara's and squeezed once. Across the aisle. Mrs. Cartwright had very still. Her face showed nothing now, not grief, not anger, just a door closing. Mr. Cartwright took her arm. They rose together and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Wyatt appeared at Clara's side. He didn't say anything, but he put his hand on her shoulder, and he left it there. Clara looked down at the children, at Lily's arms around her neck, at Samuel's hand in hers. 2 weeks ago, she'd been a stranger with 17 cents and no place to go. Now she had a family. The question was what came next. The ride home took longer than Clara remembered, or maybe time had slowed. The way it does after a storm passes, Lily slept against her shoulder, the girl's weight warm and familiar now. Her breathing was soft, even, trusting. Clara held still, afraid to wake her. Up front, Samuel sat beside Wyatt. The boy hadn't stopped talking since they left the courthouse. Questions about the ranch, about the cattle, about when he could learn to ride the big bay gelding his father used to ride. "Next spring," Wyatt said, "when you've grown another inch." "I could do it now. You could fall off and break your neck." "Spring." Samuel crossed his arms, but he was smiling. A small smile, barely there. The first real smile Clara had seen from him. The Cartwrights' carriage had already left town when they passed through the main street. Gone without a goodbye, without a backward glance. Mr. Cartwright's threats about water rights, about business difficulties, all of it evaporated the moment Judge Harlan's gavel fell. Clara watched the empty road where the black carriage had been and felt nothing. No triumph, no relief, just a quiet absence, like the space left when a storm moves on. The neighbors were different now. Mrs. Henderson, who had whispered about gold diggers at the general store, nodded to Clara as they passed. Mr. Polk, the storekeeper with the permanent squint, touched the brim of his hat. Even old Mrs. Bradshaw, who had pointedly turned her back at church last Sunday, lifted a hand in greeting. Grudging respect, not friendship, not acceptance, but something. Clara nodded back. That was enough for now. The ranch came into view as the afternoon light turned golden. The house still needed whitewash. The garden was still overrun with weeds. The broken step on the porch still waited for repair. But smoke rose from the chimney Mrs. Holloway had come by to start supper, and the windows caught the light. And for the first time since Clara had walked up that dusty road with her worn-through boots and her 17 cents, the place looked like home. She carried Lily inside and laid her on the bed. The girl stirred, mumbled something about grasshoppers, and fell back asleep. Samuel appeared in the doorway. "Can you help me with my reading?" Clara turned. The boy stood with his hands in his pockets, his eyes on the floor, his voice carefully casual. "Your reading, Mama was teaching me." He kicked at the doorframe. "She didn't get to finish." Clara's throat tightened. She swallowed. "Then we'll finish together." Samuel nodded, still not looking at her. "Tomorrow. Tomorrow." He disappeared down the hall. Clara heard his footsteps on the stairs, the creak of the floorboards in the room he shared with Lily. She stood alone in the fading light, listening to the sounds of the house settling around her. Mrs. Holloway's voice drifted up from the kitchen, singing something old and hymn-like. The smell of stew reached her beef and onions and something green. Tomorrow she would burn biscuits again. Probably. Tomorrow she would struggle with the wash, curse the lie, scrub the same stubborn stains from the same stubborn clothes. Tomorrow Samuel would test her, and Lily would need her, and Wyatt would work from dawn to dusk and barely speak. But tomorrow she would be here. That was the difference. After supper, Clara walked out to the porch. The evening air was cool, carrying the smell of hay and wood smoke and the green promise of the fields beyond. Stars were beginning to appear, one by one. Like lamps being lit in distant windows, Wyatt sat in one of the rocking chairs, the older one, the one that creaked. The other chair, newer, sat empty beside him. Clara lowered herself into it. The wood was smooth beneath her hands. Worn by years of use, they sat in silence, the kind of silence that didn't need filling. Crickets sang in the grass, somewhere in the barn. A horse shifted and snorted. The windmill turned slowly. A soft, rhythmic groan. "You could go. You know." Wyatt's voice was quiet. He didn't look at her. "I meant what I said. First day. You could stay or go. I'd pay honest wages either way." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You don't owe us anything." Clara rocked slowly. The chair creaked beneath her. "Where would I go?" The question hung in the air, not sad, not desperate, just honest. Wyatt didn't answer. "Besides," Clara said, "Samuel still hasn't told me about the mockingbird song, the one Lily sings when she's scared. I need to learn the words." Wyatt made a sound. Low. Rusty. It took Clara a moment to realize he was laughing. "Reckon you do," he said. "Reckon you do." They sewn together as the stars came out. Not touching, not talking, just two people who had started as strangers and become something else. Something they didn't have a name for yet. That was all right. Names could come later. Clara slept deeply that night. No dreams, no fever-bright visions of Margaret in the kitchen, of the Cartwrights' cold eyes, of Samuel calling for a mother who would never come. Just sleep heavy, dreamless, healing. She woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. Wyatt had made it. The kitchen showed the evidence grounds spilled on the counter. A wet rag draped over the edge of the basin. The coffee pot sitting crooked on the stove. But the coffee was hot and strong, and he'd left a cup waiting for her. Clara drank it standing at the window, watching the morning light spread across the fields. Later, she went to the spare room. Her carpet bag sat in the corner where she'd dropped it 2 weeks ago. Still packed. She'd never unpacked it, hadn't let herself. Now she knelt on the floor and opened the clasps. Her spare dress, a petticoat, a comb with 2 teeth missing, a Bible that had belonged to her mother. The spine cracked, the pages soft with use, a photograph her parents, young and formal posed, standing in front of a house she barely remembered. She hung the dress in the wardrobe, beside Margaret's dresses, not in place of them. The fabric was plainer, more worn, but it belonged there now. She set the Bible on the nightstand, propped the photograph against the lamp. The carpet bag, empty now, she placed on the high shelf of the closet, where she could reach it if she needed it. She wouldn't need it, outside the window. Wyatt was teaching Samuel to mend fence. The boy held a hammer awkwardly, his tongue poking out of the corner of his mouth in concentration. Wyatt stood beside him, guiding his hands, showing him where to strike. Clara watched them work. Uncle and nephew, 2 people learning to be something more. Like her, like all of them. Lily burst out of the house, barefoot, her braids flying. She ran toward the tall grass beyond the garden, chasing something Clara couldn't see. "Look, look." Clara walked outside. The morning sun was warm on her face, the grass cool beneath her bare feet. She crossed the yard to where Lily stood, both hands cupped carefully around something. "I caught one," Lily said. She opened her hands just enough for Clara to peek inside. A grasshopper, green and brown, its legs tucked against its body, its antennae twitching. "He's got little knees," Lily said. "See little grasshopper knees." Clara leaned closer. The grasshopper's legs were jointed, angular, surprisingly delicate. "What are you going to name him?" Lily considered this seriously. "Herbert. Herbert the grasshopper. Herbert the grasshopper." Lily nodded. satisfied. She opened her hands and Herbert leaped away, disappearing into the tall grass. Lily didn't seem disappointed. She just watched him go, then turned back to Clara. "Can we make biscuits today? I want to help." "We'll probably burn them." "That's okay." Lily reached for Clara's hand. "We can try again tomorrow." Clara looked down at the small fingers wrapped around hers, looked up at the house that needed whitewash, the garden that needed weeding, the broken step that needed fixing, looked at Wyatt and Samuel by the fence, working together in the morning light. "Yes," she said, "we can try again tomorrow." She walked back toward the house, Lily's hand in hers, the sun warm on her shoulders. Behind her, the grasshoppers sang in the tall grass. Ahead of her, breakfast waited to be made, the ordinary work of building a life. There is something quiet that stays with us after a story like this one. Not a lesson, not a message, just a feeling tender and familiar, like the weight of a hand you did not expect to hold yours. Many of us know what it means to arrive somewhere with nothing, to stand at a gate, uncertain whether to knock, to say yes to something we do not fully understand, simply because the alternative is to keep walking alone. Some of us have been Clara, asking for work when what we really needed was a place to belong. Some of us have been Wyatt, making impossible offers because we had run out of other choices. And perhaps some of us have been Samuel, arms crossed, hearts guarded, waiting to see if this stranger would stay. It is all right if this story did not answer anything for you. It is all right if something still feels unfinished. Stories, like families, do not need to be complete to be real. They are allowed to rest exactly where they are. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening.